Take a slow breath before you read the next part, because this is not light, and it did not come through easily. It moved through long silence, old distance, and pain that stayed hidden for far too long before reaching this moment. What it carries feels heavier now than it ever did before. Stay present. Listen closely. There is someone in your life who has been holding something inside for much longer than they would ever openly admit. This did not begin yesterday. It did not happen all at once. Their feelings did not suddenly turn cold one morning, and they did not truly leave things behind in the way their actions may have seemed on the surface. What really happened was quieter than that, slower than that, and far more complicated than anyone around them could fully see. They pushed their real emotions down because they did not know what else to do with them. They buried them. They covered them up. They convinced themselves that silence would be easier, cleaner, safer. But feelings buried deep do not vanish. They sit in the dark. They grow heavier. They wait. Then one day, all that weight rises at once. And that is where this message begins. It does not come from confidence. It does not come from peace. It comes from fear, from pressure, from the painful realization that too much time may have passed without action. Something has shifted inside them very recently. Maybe they saw something that reminded them of you. Maybe they heard your name. Maybe life finally became quiet enough that the truth grew louder than all the noise they had used to escape it. Stay with this, because the next part matters more than it seems at first. One thought hit them with full force. And it did not arrive gently. It came late, in stillness, in the kind of silence that makes every avoided truth feel bigger. It came when the phone stayed quiet. It came when other people started to feel distant, flat, and strangely empty. It came when the usual distractions stopped working, and the quiet began asking hard questions. That was the moment they could no longer turn away. Nobody else carries what you carry. Nobody else listened the way you listened. Nobody else understood them without needing every feeling explained in perfect detail. Nobody else gave comfort in that exact way. Soft but not controlling, warm but never suffocating. When that truth became clear, urgency started building inside them fast. But listen carefully here, because this part matters. That urgency is not made of love alone. It is also built from fear. Fear of losing something rare, fear of losing a connection that cannot simply be replaced later by someone similar. If they could speak to you right now without pride in the way, without excuses building walls around every honest word, they would say something very plain. They should have done more, and they should have done it much sooner. They thought they had more time than they really did. They believed your patience would remain there no matter how long they stayed quiet. They did not understand that silence leaves real damage. They are beginning to see that doing nothing is still a choice, and that choice changed the bond between you in ways they can no longer deny. Keep listening, because what they feel now is not only regret, it is the shock of finally seeing the cost. They carry guilt for not being there, when being there mattered most. They carry guilt for staying quiet when honest words were needed. They carry guilt for not finding the courage to be open, when openness was the only thing that could have helped. At the time, distance felt easier to manage. Silence felt safer than truth. Avoidance felt like control. But avoiding pain never saves anyone from it. It only delays the impact and gives it more time to grow stronger. This person does not struggle because they feel too little. They struggle because they feel too much and do not know how to hold it well. To open up to you would have meant real risk. It would have meant possible rejection. It would have meant losing emotional balance. It would have meant facing parts of themselves they were not ready to face. So instead of listening to the truth in their own heart, they let fear make the big decisions. They let pride speak for them. They let silence speak even louder than pride. And now those old choices have become consequences they cannot ignore anymore. There is a deeper layer too, and it weighs on them heavily. They can feel that you are not the same as before. Something in you has shifted. Your energy is different. Your responses feel different. Even your silence feels different. You may still care, but you are no longer chasing clarity, no longer repeating yourself, no longer standing in that same place of confusion and hurt. That change unsettles them more than they expected. Why? Because they leaned on your patience more than was fair. They leaned on your softness while keeping their own walls up. Deep down they assumed you would always be there, and now they are realizing you may not be. That is what shakes them. It is not only the fear of losing you as a person. It is the fear of losing the feeling of being deeply seen without judgment. It is the fear of losing that emotional safety they depended on more than they ever admitted. It is the fear of losing that rare space where they felt understood without being pushed past their limits too fast. Only now are they starting to understand that not every bond can be rebuilt after it breaks. Not every connection can be found again in someone new. That understanding follows them everywhere now. It shows up in quiet moments. It rises when they try to move on and cannot find steady ground. It returns whenever they compare another person to you and feel the difference immediately. This is why the urgency keeps growing. It is not mainly about control. It is about time. They can feel a door beginning to close, slowly, quietly, without drama, without some loud final speech. And that kind of closing is often the most serious kind, because when a heart closes softly, it rarely opens quickly again. They want to reach out. They want to explain. They want to offer an apology that means something and does not sound empty or defensive. But fear keeps stopping them before they begin. Fear asks if it is already too late. Fear whispers that maybe you no longer care like you once did. Fear tells them that if they finally show their real self, they may be turned away, so they hesitate. They write messages in their head and erase them before sending. They imagine full conversations that never happen. They think through every possible ending and still remain still. Do not miss this, because this is where their struggle becomes most visible. This is not a promise of a happy ending. It is not a neat story. It is not a guarantee that everything will suddenly become right. It is closer to a confession carried from a distance. They are not pretending all the damage is fixed. They are not claiming they now have every answer they lacked before. What they are finally admitting, even if only to themselves, is that treating you like you would always be there was wrong. They did not understand your value until they felt the emptiness left behind in the place you used to fill. And when truth arrives this late, it hurts more, because it arrives side by side with loss. But what this means for you matters more than what it means for them. Listen carefully. This is not telling you to wait. It is not asking you to forgive before you are ready. It is not pushing you back into pain you already survived. It only reveals what they failed to show through actions. You mattered far more than they ever found a way to say. Your absence speaks louder to them now than your presence seemed to when you were still there. What existed between you was real, even if it was handled badly. But the real power now belongs to your next choice, not their sudden panic. Desperation is not always the same thing as readiness. A person can feel intense regret and still not be able to love well in a steady, healthy way. Right now they are sitting with the truth of who they were when it truly counted. Results are honest. They cut through excuses. They strip away the stories people tell themselves for comfort. And the truth is pressing on them harder now than ever before. They keep going back over old moments, small ones, quiet ones, things they once thought did not matter much. Now those same moments feel heavy. They remember the simple things you did without making a show of them. They remember how you checked on them for no special reason. They remember how you could sense their mood before words were spoken. They remember how you stayed steady even when they pulled away. They remember how you looked for understanding before blame. These memories hurt now because they reveal something hard to face. You met them at a depth they had not yet reached in themselves. They stepped back from the emotional responsibility that comes with real closeness. For a long time they treated distance like protection. Now that same distance feels more like exposure. They feel seen by you even through the silence. And your silence has changed. It no longer feels like a pause. It feels like space. It no longer feels temporary. It feels like something that could continue. That difference weighs on them. They can sense that you are no longer building your emotional life around their confusion. You are no longer waiting for them to catch up while you stand still. That creates another fear inside them, deeper than the first. Not only the fear that you may say no if they reach out, but the fear that they no longer hold the same place in your life. They worry you may have quietly moved on without drama, without a final fight, without needing to explain. And that kind of calm can frighten someone who once depended on your availability more than they deserved. Stay with this. The truth becomes sharper from here. They are reaching another understanding now. You never asked them to be perfect. You never demanded constant intensity. You asked for consistency. You asked them to show up when it mattered. You were not asking them to become someone completely different. You were asking them to live like the person they claimed they were. Now they see how often they chose comfort when courage was needed. They kept saying they were not ready. They made reasons for the silence. They built explanations for the distance. They kept telling themselves the moment was never quite right. But readiness does not just appear one day like magic. It is a choice. And while you were offering honesty, care, and presence, they did not meet you there. That realization hurts now, because the chance no longer feels the same. They can feel the change in you. It shows in your tone, in your pace, in the fact that you no longer work so hard to prove your worth. It lives in the quiet strength that has replaced all the reaching. That shift changes everything. They mistook your patience for endless availability. They confused kindness with permanence. They assumed your care meant infinite waiting. They forgot that patience has limits, and that self-respect eventually rises. Now they are stuck in a hard place. They want to come closer, but they do not want to begin something they cannot sustain. They want to apologize, but they fear offering words they cannot back up with action. They want the closeness again, but they know closeness must be carried, protected, and maintained. So they remain suspended, wanting and avoiding at the same time, pulled toward you while still trapped in old habits. That is why their energy feels mixed, uneven, restless. Their heart points one way, but their actions still point another. They imagine taking the brave step. They imagine saying the right words. They imagine showing up as a better version of themselves. But imagining is easy. Living it is harder. Real change asks for repeated action over time. It asks for honesty when hiding would feel easier. It asks for consistency after the first emotional moment passes. And deep down they know that words alone will not be enough anymore. You are no longer waiting to be moved by promises. You are watching for what is real. This does not mean your care vanished. It means you became stronger, quietly. You sat with your sadness. You faced disappointment without running from it. You let reality become clear. They are only beginning that process now, and timing matters. Growing through loss feels different from growing while love still remains close enough to touch. They know this, even if they cannot say it fully. They know that even if they speak now, what existed before cannot simply return in the same shape. That frightens them, because what they miss most may be the version of you that trusted freely. Trust does not reset just because someone finally says the right thing late in the story. Once trust changes, it changes the whole structure of the bond. So now they stand at a threshold. Behind them is the old comfort of hiding. In front of them is the risk of honesty without shields. If they stay where they are, they may lose you completely. If they move forward, they must face themselves without excuses. That is what they avoided for so long, and that is why this inner pressure keeps building. What you have been sensing is not random. It is not nothing. A real shift is happening. Quietly, deeply, steadily. Loss does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it enters like a whisper. Sometimes it appears as emotional distance. Sometimes it shows up in a calm change inside someone that cannot be argued with. They feel that whisper now when they think about calling you. They feel it when they imagine you moving ahead with peace instead of bitterness. That picture unsettles them because they cannot stop it. They cannot distract themselves past it forever. For the first time, They are facing what their fear has truly cost them. For a long time they fought their own feelings. They resisted the responsibility of being fully present. They pushed back against softness, truth, and emotional risk. Now all that resistance has turned into pressure with nowhere left to go. They are not only afraid of losing you, they are afraid of what losing you reveals about who they have been. At the deepest level, they know this was never just bad timing. It was fear of being fully seen, fear of failing in love, fear of not knowing how to hold something real without damaging it. They keep returning to moments where they could have spoken and stayed silent instead. Back then those moments seemed small. Now they feel heavy. You did not suddenly disappear from the connection. You slowly adjusted to what they actually gave. You stopped carrying everything alone. You stopped filling silence with hope. You stopped wounding yourself just to keep the bond alive. That kind of change happens slowly. No big announcement, no dramatic ending. But they see it now. They notice that you do not lean toward them in the same way anymore. They notice that their moods no longer control your world. They notice that your calm has become the loudest message of all. And calm can feel more final than anger. Anger still carries heat. Calm often carries acceptance. Calm suggests that you may no longer be waiting for a different outcome. They understand confusion. They understand mixed signals. What they do not understand is your clarity. You are no longer waiting to be chosen. You are standing in your own value, and that changes the whole field around them. Their fear grows deeper because of that. They worry that if they come forward now, it will expose how unready they still are. They worry they cannot become the person you would need. They worry you may see them more clearly than they see themselves. It is hard for someone used to hiding behind reasons to stand fully in truth. They want to tell you their feelings were real. They want to explain the silence. They want to say how overwhelmed they felt. But they are learning a painful lesson. Arriving late does not erase the past. Good intentions do not cancel what you lived through. An apology does not rebuild trust without proof. They know this, and that is part of why they pause. Growth is uncomfortable. They are inside that discomfort now. The discomfort of missed chances. The discomfort of self-awareness. The discomfort of realizing change came after the best moment may already have passed. And that is the true urgency burning in them now, not just to reach you, but to finally face themselves. You were a mirror for them. You reflected depth, courage, tenderness, and emotional honesty. Instead of looking fully into that mirror, they turned away. Now, without your presence, they feel the loss of that reflection. They feel cut off from a part of themselves they only seemed able to access around you. That absence forces hard questions. What you have been sensing is not only that they miss you, it is that they are waking up, slowly, painfully, to themselves. Regret stings, and your strength makes that regret sharper. They know they cannot return casually this time. You did not break when they pulled away. You did not collapse. You did not beg forever. You found more of yourself. You protected your peace. That has increased their respect for you even as it has increased their fear. They understand that if they ever come back, it cannot be with half-truths, weak effort, or temporary emotion. It would have to be with honesty and real change. The stakes feel real now. The truth is visible now. That is why they feel unsteady. They do not want to come back as the old version of themselves. But they are not fully sure who they are without those old walls. And still, the deepest power remains with you. You do not need to move because they are afraid. You do not need to reopen a door simply because they finally felt the silence. The only thing asked of you is honesty with yourself. If this message reached you at the right time, then maybe you already know the real question was never only whether they feel the loss now. The real question is whether anything true, steady, and lasting can actually grow from that loss in the end. And that answer will never come from words alone. It will come from what is finally lived.